Hi everyone, welcome back to Value Open Source, our podcast about everything related to open source and more. With me today is Oren Eini. Oren is a developer and open source entrepreneur and a very prolific blogger. Oren is focused on the .NET framework and he's also been recognized as a Microsoft MVP since 2007, which is very impressive. He's also an internationally acclaimed presenter, performing at top conferences across the world, showing his vast .NET experience with everyone. And lastly, he's the CEO of Hibernating Rhinos, which are developing the awesome document database called RavenDB. Oren, it's great to see you. Great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So Oren, after this long introduction, can you tell us a bit about how you became involved with software development and how you became involved with open source specifically?
Yeah. So, as far as back as I remember, I was always interested in computers. Somewhere mid-high school, I got into programming. Was very bad at that.
Bad at programming?
Yeah. I remember we were being taught Pascal at high school, and I remember being taught dynamic memory management. And not only did I not get it, I did not get what it is, why. You have an array, just define a static array and everything will work.
Well, Pascal does not make sense, so you're not alone.
Yeah, but there is not make sense, and there is two levels below that. I don't understand what I don't understand.
Okay.
And I remember after high school, I had a year-long C++ course, and moving from Pascal to C is a very big difference. And at some point, I learned pointers. And I remember they took me months to realize that the topic I never understood clicked.
Yeah.
It made sense, it was obvious. I had awesome teachers for both of them, by the way. But it just happened that with C I got it, with Pascal it was like...
Because pointers make sense and Pascal does not.
Yeah. And I knew that, okay, this is what I love to do. And then I went to the army. And 2001, 2005 I was in prison.
In prison?
In prison, yes.
Okay. Do tell.
Yeah. Basically, I went to the army and told them, I want to do computers. And they said, we heard you, go to basic training, we talk to you later. I went to basic training. And after basic training, they said, okay, go do the course, we talk later. And it went on and on like that. And eventually they tell me, okay, now you're a certified prison guard, go to prison. And I said,
as a guard, not as a prisoner.
Guard, yes. And at that point I said, I don't want to. What about computers? And they told me, look, we'll give you two options. You can go to prison or you can go to prison. In one set of options, you have the key. In the the other one, you don't have one.
So you either go to prison as a guard or as a prisoner?
Yes.
Tough choice.
Yeah. Actually tough in retrospect. Prison is unpleasant.
I'm sure.
Yeah. So I spent some time being a prison guard. Eventually I became an officer. My last duty position in the army was as a commander of a small prison. And you know how they say that prison gives you a lot of time? It turns out if you have a small prison, as a commander, you also have a lot of time.
Okay.
I don't know if the viewers understand the way the army works here in Israel, but for the first 3 years in the army, you don't get a salary, you get a stipend. At the time, it was less than $100 per month.
Yeah.
And I remember getting out of the mandatory service and going into the last year, which was also mandatory for me. And
as an officer?
As an officer, yes. And at that point, I remember getting paid like a salary, which wasn't huge. It's $1,200-$1,400, something like that per month. And what I remember most vividly is getting the first paycheck and being the richest I've ever been and ever will be. because I could literally buy everything that I wanted.
That's awesome.
Yeah, not that I wanted that much, but everything that I wanted I could.
Probably went and bought some computers.
Exactly. By the way, up to this day, the most mission critical I've built, and I've built stuff that move quite a lot of money around, is a prison management system in VBA in Excel.
VBA?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because in prison, I literally had physical files. And if I wanted to do something like, is so here, I would have to go and look at a big filing cabinet.
Yeah.
And that was stupid. So I opened Excel, wrote some things down, and I wanted to do stuff. And this is a military computer. You're lucky you have Excel.
You're lucky you could run macros so you can run VBA.
Yeah.
Most of them are locked, I know.
Yeah, I think that they assume that the operators of these kind of machines don't know what that is.
Yeah.
And those are locked networks and a bunch of other crap like that. So that was my
introduction into computers, building a prison management system.
As a prison manager, the prison management system was written in Excel. It was actually quite good in a horrible sort of way.
It's probably still functional to this day.
I think they moved. I think that they eventually moved that prison from the army to the prison service, so they got rid of everything and used actual proper systems, which I'm very gratified about. So I think that they moved it from the army to the prison service, which means that they actually use real system. Yeah. But this was a system that literally, if there is a bug here, I go to jail.
Well, you're close, so it's not a long walk.
Yeah, and the funny thing about that is that at some point, I automated most of the jobs that I had, so I had a lot of free time. And I was stuck in a military base, no internet, nothing whatsoever. So I started, and I had a shiny new and really expensive laptop. So I wrote code, and I read college level books, a lot of Martin Fowler, the Dinos book, Tenenbaum, stuff like that. And
so many people go to the gym in prison. You wrote code.
Yeah. I think that was much better use of my time. Yeah. And I was literally in prison, and I wanted to have outside communication. I started writing the blog at that time frame, and I started getting involved in open source projects, because here is a way for me, without industry experience, without any foot in the door before college, to actually do meaningful, interesting work.
As a contributor? As
a contributor, as someone who is playing around and having fun, and not just throwing stuff into the drawer. Here is, for a very long time, it was, let me show you my portfolio. Let me get feedback, not from people who I might know that, here is John, he's also a student in my class. He has the same ability to evaluate what I'm doing. And I joined a couple of open source projects. The Castle project in particular was quite amazing. I had the chance to work with brilliant people in a very direct way.
Yeah.
So instead of looking at the other paths I could have taken, I could have joined a company and probably work and have exposure to some of the techniques that they have in-house. But the chance that would have the access to world-class talent of this caliber is probably a lot less.
So open source got you involved with people of high caliber early on.
Yes, and it also got me, looking back, I even in prison started working on the Hibernating project. The Hibernating project was how I got well known. I was very involved with that for a very long time. I created the company on tools based on this, on consulting and work directly related to that. In many respects, that time frame, my last year in the army, where I spent my spare time reading, working effectively with legacy code and release it, and books of this nature are the foundation of who I am professionally.
Okay. So your prison roots are still with you till this day.
Yeah.
So, Oren, you run a successful open source business today.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a bit about how it started and what kind of challenges you faced early on?
So the company went through a couple of very different approaches to actually making money from open source. I mentioned the Hibernating project. To those of you who don't know, this is an object relational mapper based on the Hibernating project in Java. In 2005 to 2012, that was its heyday, where it was the most commonly used ORM in the .NET framework. And I was very involved with that. And I was a consultant for a while, working at a company in Israel. Afterward, I became an independent consultant, mostly going to customers and helping them work with their Hibernating usage, with database performance stuff, those sorts of things. Some of that involved fixing bugs or adding features to the Hibernating project. I was also involved with a whole bunch of other projects at the time, but I'm focusing on Hibernating because it's the most well-known one. Eventually, I decided that getting paid on an hourly basis is a great way to burn yourself out. I was 28 or something at the time, had my second burnout.
Second, at 28?
Yes.
That's early on. When was the first one?
7 or 8 months earlier than that. I was working.
Okay.
No, that was about a year earlier. I was working on a project that in 2007 I was working on a commercial project for a big company, and I was the lead developer there. I had the sole responsibility for all of the software decisions. We were able to go live in 27 seconds from hitting the build button. And that was a very successful project, so I was moved after this was done to another project that needed my assistance. In that project, I had to use an existing framework, an existing toolset, and that meant that we had to struggle a lot. By a lot, I mean that the deployment, which in my previous project, 27 seconds, now took us 3 weeks and involved replacing the customer's domain controller. I don't know why we needed to do that to this day, but that was what fixed some obscure issues.
Okay. But circling back to the early days of Ravid Hibernating Rhinos.
I'm getting that. So at that same time frame, I was working many hours, then coming home and doing open source stuff, and that was the first burn through. Quit, move on for myself, work even more hours. Most of them on open source, but that was not a sustainable approach, especially not, again, I'm 28, 30, and I got physically sick every time I sat near a computer.
Wow.
Yeah. At that time, I decided, okay, I need some other way to make money. I created a tool which is an Hibernating profiler to analyze the interaction of your database and the application and provide recommendation. Basically, take everything I know about an Hibernate and apply that in an automated fashion. And that worked, and we made some nice money from that. But I kept being in the same spot of go to an application, see that it's sick, give them the same exact steps to fix this, move on, do the same. It was very tiring, and I wanted to do something else. And what happened was that RavenDB wasn't intentional. Building a database is a huge task. You don't do that. What I've decided to do, I'm just how I wish a database would look like. And as it turned out, it literally kept me up at night. I remember waking up at 2 a.m. and looking at the ceiling, and I could see the different components like moving around, print minority report. It was very freaky. I got up, started coding.
So it started like as a passion project, as a pet project?
It started as a burning desire in my head that I had to get it out.
Awesome.
And at some point, it was 3 months later, and I will spend a weekend. I will spend a week on it, that's it. But it was 3 months later, I was doing 90% RavenDB. And I used my blog, tried to get some other people to come and help me build UI, give me feedback, those sorts of things. At the beginning, the working group for RavenDB was over 30 volunteers who helped make it what it is today.
Awesome.
And but it was literally taking all of my time. So I sat down and decided that, okay, I'm going to have to stop doing that as a project and start having a business plan. Now, the business plan that I had was no one would ever try to buy it. Let's see how I can mitigate risk. And let's see how, when I inevitably is going to fail, I'm going to still have my shot. So I came up with pricing, how I'm going to sell it, and a bunch of other stuff, and did it. And people bought it, and then more people bought it. And we're now a decade later, and we have a company here that is mostly all about RavenDB.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So when did you first decide that RavenDB was something that you wanted to monetize? Like, when was the moment that you figured that, okay, this is such a good product that people are going to pay? Because I'm asking because a lot of people, are struggling.
Yeah, from my perspective, it wasn't about thinking it's good enough that people would pay. It was more about I'm possessed with this project and with this idea, and it has to go out, and I have to be able to channel it. And honestly, I sat down and thought about how do I fail properly so I don't lose my shot. And we didn't fail. I didn't fail in this regard. But part of the process was, okay, what am I going to put into this project? How much time, how much money, how much effort? And how am I going to think upfront about what is the monetization strategy? For example, open source monetization strategies are typically either consulting and support, open core, a hosted solution now, which is also good, and there's another two that I don't recall right now.
Dual licensing is one of the options.
And the way that I decided to do that was RavenDB is open source. While it is open source, and we use the AGPL model for that, we're going to sell licenses just like it was a standard commercial software.
So you had it was available as AGPL, but what type of licenses did you sell? Like proprietary licenses?
Yeah. You have, here is the source code is here, it's under the AGPL. Mm-hmm. If you want to buy it, go and buy it for me to be able to run it as a commercial license. That also meant that, for example, right now, in the same model, you can go and download RavenDB from our website, mm-hmm. and it will tell you, okay, here, put in a license and a license key, basically. And you can get one for free from the website, and certain feature will not work.
Yeah.
But the whole thing is open source. You can go and build your own and remove whatever you want from there. But what we found is that most users don't want that. Most users want to have that comfortable, someone is backing that, and I don't want to have to deal with building, deployment, maintenance, patching, and all of those sort of things.
Do you invest any time or resources in enforcing the license?
No.
You presume that people would pay and not use?
Most of the cases that we've seen is that you can't get blood out of stone. That means that if someone, look, at one point I mentioned that I had a profiler. Profiler was a closed source project, standard commercial software. People sent me patches for that.
Really?
Now I'm like, you have another reference here, and you have to add an if statement in this method. I'm like, what? How? So people literally decompile my code, found the problem, fix it locally, recompile and run. I'm like, okay, and now that's a really nice thing to have to do. It's okay, wonderful, but at the same time, it's also a really good indication that if you have software that is running on the client machine, they own that. They do whatever they want with that. With RavenDB, for a whole host of reasons, we want to be open source. And that means that someone can literally go to the code and, if license, return, let's just comment that, and that would work.
Yeah.
But very few people, if any, are doing that.
That's awesome. It's great to hear, because I know that a lot of people are worried that once they open source their code and use even permissive licenses, not necessarily copyleft licenses like AGPL, that people would steal their code. And pirates will always, there's always going to be pirates.
Yeah, and the question here is how much effort are you going to put into preventing them, especially when, how do you steal an open source project?
Yeah.
Because I literally...
give the code away.
Yeah. So it doesn't make much sense, and in most cases people just don't want to do that. Especially when you start, it also depends on what sort of projects do you have. If you have someone who is aimed at the general consumer, then there is a much higher likelihood that people would fork, remove the license restrictions, stuff like that. If you're talking about something that is going to be run by at a company data center that has to have support and all of those, that's a completely different ballgame.
Yeah.
You have to take that into account as well.
Okay, so you've spoken about a few monetization options like open core and support and etc. Have you had any experience with alternative monetization options like donations, for example? That's the response I usually get.
Yeah, look, I think that at one point I had concurrently something like 16 or 20 large open source project with community, with active operations. One of my most popular projects in the 2000 years, it was a project called Rhinomox, which is a mocking library for .NET.
Okay.
It was the library for mocking .NET at the time frame. And at some point someone came to me, and that was licensed under the BSD. So completely free and do whatever you want, just don't sue me. And someone came to me and says, look, my company refuses to use open source at all. And I said, okay, what do you want from me? And he said, I want to buy licenses for Rhinomox. I said, what? It's free.
It's BSD,
Yeah.
use it as...
Yeah, no, I need it in a commercial license. So we had a negotiation process in which I felt really ridiculous. Okay, and
You're selling something that's free.
Yes.
That's awesome.
I wish there was an achievement for that. Anyway, so I think that I sent him an invoice for $700, and I actually got $700. And the reason I'm telling you this story, and compared to donations, I had a donation button for years in there, and I don't think I made $100.
That's ridiculous.
In multiple years, and just literally it's like a drive-by sale is 20 times more than I made ever from donations. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Presumably, you might be able to do things like being really annoying to people, so they would send you some money.
Eventually nag them enough until they donate.
But you can also see how it works with Wikipedia, which every now and then become really annoying with nagging about give us money, and they are a really huge project in terms of reach. And if you try to look at most other projects, then you're not going to see any monetization at all.
Yeah, that's true and sad that, speaking of Wikipedia, it's something that everybody is using, and I don't think like even 0.5% of the population, maybe 0.1% actually donate. So it's sad. So let's say if you were mentoring like a young open source developer early on, like what type of advice would you give him or her as an experienced open source entrepreneur?
There has to be some idea about what are the expectations. There are people who want to say, okay, I'm done with college, now I want to go find a good work. Where do you want to work? In a non-profit. Doing what? Just a non-profit. So those are people where the value system is, I want to work at a non-profit because that means that I'm doing good for whatever value of good there is. You can have the same mentality if you think about this for open source. You still need to eat. Presumably, if you don't have, a trust fund in the background, you want to make money.
Yeah.
Open source can give you quite a lot of benefits, but it isn't necessarily going to directly translate to money. No one is going to throw money at an open source project by default.
Yeah.
If you're getting started, I think that having access to top tier talent is something that can be very helpful. Think about something like this. Why do people pay a lot to say I went to Yale or Harvard or those sorts of things? Because of the network effect in there, because presumably the quality of faculty and interaction is much higher.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
plus it's a nice line on the resume.
Yeah, but why is it a nice line on the resume?
Yeah.
That's the point. So try to imagine this. If you go and look at the top tier talent worldwide in programming, you have Mr. X in Amazon or Dr. N in Microsoft or those sorts of things, which are giants in the field and known to 20 people, 200 people in their company. And the chance of you being able to work with them is minimal. Talk about Anders Heisenberg in Microsoft, Dave Cutler with the anti-kernel, those sort of people who really made a fundamental difference in the industry at large. But when you say, okay, I want to work with someone who is as good as Dave Cutler, well, go work for Microsoft, get into the kernel team, spend a whole bunch of time and effort, and maybe you will be in the same building.
Yeah.
Okay. If you want Linus to review your code, submit a patch to the Linux kernel. Eventually, it will get there.
Yeah.
Even
though I'm not sure he's going over pull requests.
Not necessarily. Make a bad enough judgment, and he would write something about it.
Yeah.
But the point here is that now you have one option. Okay, I know that this is it's very funny to say a programming celebrity.
Yeah.
But you have a programming celebrity like Dave Cutler, and I want to learn from him because I think he's a fascinating person. Okay, I don't have any access to him.
Yeah.
I have, but an open source developer can have access to Linus. More than that, as an open source developer, you can submit a patch, and the person who is going to review your patch has been directly working on the Linux kernel for some time and is familiar and can give you a lot of the benefits of working with Linux because it trickles down the semantics. And I'm using this intentionally. The ability to interact directly with those kind of people is very helpful. It certainly has been helpful for me. I got into code bases, I've done things that I never thought were possible.
Yeah.
I remember as early on in my career, I suddenly needed to debug IL and assembly and stuff like that and do dynamic code generation, like black magic, here I come. And there was a library. So I just used this library and there was a bug. So I went and tried to just just the tiniest bit that I need to do in order to fix that. And over time, suddenly you realize, okay, this is not scary. I know how this is done. And okay, this is no longer black magic.
Yeah, for a lot of people, assembly is black magic.
Yeah, well, it is. But if you don't try to look at this much assembly, if you try to look at this thing, it makes sense. And I don't need it to be a elephants. I need it to be a C move or just random assembly instructions, and something works. Now you know something. The next time that you will realize, you will be able to do just one tiny step further. And that matters because now you have this capability, and that turned out to be really, really helpful in some other cases.
Yeah.
At one point, I had a slow system, so I generated some IO on the fly to generate a code to recompile on the fly. Suddenly, I moved from something taking 5 times a second to something taking 50,000 times a second. Now, okay, I'm done here. Go home. Mm-hmm. So that's one aspect of that. The other aspect of that is that you build a portfolio. When I get to the point where I'm hiring someone, there is a GitHub link or something is similar, I go and look. And I look at the code and I see what they're doing. And some people try to game it with, I have lots of forked repositories.
And a lot of stars.
But you go and look, and it's very easy to see what they've actually done. And it tells quite a lot. And it means that if you now go and says, okay, what have you done? Here is my history. Here is my active portfolio, and it matters.
Yeah.
As
an employer, you
as an employer, I absolutely look at that. As someone who looked for a job after the army, before I started college, I said, okay, I need to start college. I need to learn how to do things. Another 3-4 years before I can actually start life, or I can submit CVs, and here is my actual resume. I'm building, data access layers and stuff like that, and I don't need to pretend that, you don't need to take a risk on me.
Yeah.
Here are my credentials.
Here's what I know.
Yes, and that was really helpful. And there is this tendency of cheap people to say, okay, come and work for me. I will not pay you, but you'll get awesome reputation.
Oldest trick in the book.
Yes. And it is a trick. It's typically a scam, but in open source projects, you can think of this not as come work for me, come contribute to the project. You're not getting paid, but you are going to be able to use that to enhance your reputation. And I know that people, even if they've made small contributions, and in some cases, go look and fix it and try to fix a bug. It doesn't have to be accepted, but just a kind of interaction that you have around that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's talk a bit about promotion. A lot of open source projects suffer from lack of traction. So as a person who really succeeded in promoting his open source project, what can you tell us on maybe some tips and tricks on how to get your project known?
That's a really hard question. The way I did it was I blogged. I wrote about what am I doing, how am I doing that. I had a lot of interactions with users, and that worked. A lot of that depends on what sort of how social you're able or willing to be. And I got into computers because computers meant that I don't have to talk to people. And here we are.
Many of us did the exact same thing.
Yes. And as it turns out, if you want to, there is no magic formula. Okay, Git, make famous, enter.
That would probably help.
Yeah. But the making waves talking about this, going to user groups and displaying things. By the way, it doesn't necessarily have to be about the project directly. It can be about the process that you're working with the project. For example, some of the most popular things that we've done with RavidDB was, most popular posts about RavidDB were the parts where we improve performance. So we had a detailed walkthroughs. Here's the performance problem, here's how we investigate, here's how we fix, here's the result. And people came to look at the method. How can I make my own software be faster?
So you used your internal methods as a way of bringing people in.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah. I do a lot of speaking, and one of the things that we're speaking about is what goes on behind the scenes. Not necessarily about RavidDB itself, but for example, let me tell you what I know about Linux memory management and some of the very frightening things that are happening there. Yes. Because I'm dealing with that, and that gets you some attention.
Yeah.
And hopefully that gets you traction. Nothing helps if you don't have a good product. But more importantly, there is also something crucial to understand. And most open source projects are not products, and there is a very big distinction between them. A project is some code that works and serves a need. A product is something that is a lot more. It has an installer, documentation, there is someone sat and wrote an FAQ, there is a good error handling. It's not okay, it works on my machine, throw it out there and they will come.
Yeah.
It's someone put a lot of work on the
ecosystem.
On the ecosystem, on everything that is around that. Think about an open source project as a house in the wood. The product is making sure that there is a road and there is a sign and someone cleaning up all of the potholes.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so after talking about you and your projects, from your experience, how do you see the future of open source? Where are things going in the future?
I think that there are 2 or 3 different types of projects. There is the stuff that is small enough that you can get it done by one person, small team in a reasonable fashion. Those tends to be very specific tools. Oh, I want to build something that scrape the supermarket feeds and analyze whatever I have good offers, those sort of things. But take that single thing and says, okay, now I want to make it accessible to the public, so I have to have a website. And suddenly went from, okay, one person, a couple of weeks, or a month of doing nights, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Okay, now this is, I have to have a designer and someone who is, okay, the cost of that has exploded. And so the problem here is what sort of open source project are you talking about? And traditionally there has been things that grow organically. A good example would be the Apache project, mm-hmm. The Linux kernel obviously, but then you have something like Kubernetes. And that is a very conscious decision of taking by a big company. Here is a team, go sit, build that, and then we're going to...
Then it's heavily promoted.
Yes. But again, Kubernetes is heavily promoted because the Google Cloud Platform is in third place. It's absolutely in Google's best interest to commoditize the cloud so people can more easily move to their cloud.
Yeah.
And that's something that you have to take into account. What are the... I'm trying to think about the economic definition. The sidecar projects are not the complementary products. That's the term.
Okay.
What are the complementary products to an open source project? Is it something like, okay, cloud services and Kubernetes? Make the cloud service, make the Kubernetes something that is ubiquitous, and you can go from cloud to cloud, and GCP can have more customers.
Yeah.
You can see that in many other projects. So that's one side of things where we're saying, okay, let's use the open source nature as a way to reduce to as much as zero the cost of something that is complementary to a service that I offer.
Yeah.
The other thing is if you have passion projects, stuff that are small, and the question is whatever then you want to have money and customers involved. Some people just want to build stuff because Temple OS is a great example of that. I don't think that anyone ever used that in the commercial settings.
Yeah.
And I certainly wouldn't want to trust that project.
On a commercial
Yes.
level.
Yeah.
But I don't think any, like 100% of open source projects should be monetized. I think there should
Yeah.
be, like a distinction between projects that should be monetized and projects that, just are
But the
pet
question,
projects.
but the question is, at what point do you get there? I had several projects that got to the point where, okay, I'm done with them. I've done everything that I wanted to do there, but I accidentally got users. And those users came to me and says, oh, can you fix this? Can you fix that?
Yeah.
Oh, your software doesn't work or .NET 4.6.2. Yeah, because last time I actually opened that project was 2 years ago. What do you want from me?
Yeah.
Make a release. And a bunch of other stuff like that. And at that point, you actually stuck in a somewhat vague moral place because, okay, I released the software, I have users who are actually depending on that. Do I continue to support it?
Yeah.
And the answer to that is that an open source project can be like a baby. It certainly keeps you up at night, but it's not something that you are tied to for the rest of your life. And at some point, and I think that most successful open source projects have such issues, is that you have to realize that, okay, where do I draw the line of if you want to get more, you have to actually put your wallet where your mouth is.
Yeah.
And that matters. And in some cases, people want to use you because, oh, you're free, they assume that you're free, and they assume that your time is therefore also free.
Yeah. If you gave your code for free, that means they bought you.
Yes, yes. My answer to that was, give me your bank account details, or we send you a refund. It only works, that particular step only works in the States because in here, if I give you my bank account details, you don't actually get access to my bank account.
You can give me your ATM PIN code.
Yes.
Or something.
Yes.
Okay, that's awesome because, the differentiation between what to monetize and what not to monetize, a lot of developers are afraid that once they release something out there, they become committed to their clients. And in some cases, that's true.
But the really interesting word here is client. Client means you pay me money.
Yeah, yeah. If somebody doesn't pay, you're not obligated. But even if someone does pay, it doesn't necessarily mean you're obligated.
And I can tell you something else that is very important, not related to open source at all. Some part of being good in business is to know when to fire the client. Thank you. You're giving me $20,000 a year, but you're giving me also an ulcer. The medical bills are not worth it. Thank you very much. Goodbye. Here is this guy who is more than willing to take antacids every hour. Have fun.
Okay, so Oren, our last question is like the same question for all of our guests. In what ways do you continue to improve yourself and better yourself?
I read both technical news, and I go and do detailed reviews of projects, open source projects in particular. I try to not stay in a niche or .NET projects of doing stuff like that. I read in multiple layers, multiple languages, try to understand the gist of what people are trying to do. I tend to do that as a blog post, and there's been some very positive feedback on those. But I mostly do that for me because seeing how people solve problems is really interesting. I also treat it very much as a game because I tend to, oh, you have documentation, I don't care about that. Let's go look at the code.
And understand and reverse engineer.
Yes, and try to go back from the code to understand what was why did you use a hash set here when a list would be sufficient? I can work out what's going on and those sorts of things. And
like mental exercises from reverse engineering the code.
And it's also much more interesting because as someone who deals with software professionally, I read a lot more code than I write. And literally today, we were looking at a memory leak in some of our code, and we managed to trace it down to a piece of code that was written 6 years ago.
6 years ago?
Yeah. And apparently there is something where we would do a cleanup of a maximum of 128 items every 5 seconds. And for 6 years, there has been no case where we weren't able to catch up through that. And now we have a scenario where we have that. And in order to understand that bug, you have to be able to look at this code, understand that, look at this code, understand that, and look at this exercise of going to a code base that you're not familiar with, sometimes in a language you're not familiar with.
Getting the context.
Yeah, getting the context, it's very helpful. It's also, at least for me, it's lots of fun.
Yeah. All right, awesome. So last but not least, our associative quiz that we ask everyone. So Mac or PC?
PC. Mac is more expensive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Browser of choice?
Chrome.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Which IDE do you use when you write code?
Visual Studio most of the time, or Sublime.
Okay. GitHub, Bitbucket, or GitLab? GitHub. Good answer. Star Wars or Star Trek?
Marvel Universe.
Okay. Got me there.
Yeah.
Game of choice, if you game?
Diablo. All three of them.
There's a fourth one coming.
Really?
Yeah.
I love that.
They just announced it this week.
Okay, so 2022, I will make some time.
All right. And lastly, your top 3 open source projects. Not yours, for someone else's.
LMDB, which is Lightning Memory DB by Howard Chu. He's working on OpenLDAP. It's a small code base, about less than 10,000 lines of C. It's incredibly dense. It's not a hard read. It's not an easy read, but it's a really interesting one. I got a lot from that. Couchbase, not CouchDB, not Couchbase. I'm thinking about really good reviews that I've done that taught me a lot. Couchbase is written in Erlang. I read the code in 2008, 2007. But it was really interesting to look at non-trivial code base in that time frame. And Lucene, which is search engine library.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, it's in the world of search, full text search, there is Lucene and there is not Lucene. And not Lucene tends to suck.
Right.
Yeah, literally every full text search ever will compare itself to Lucene because that's the industry standard and that's the only thing that matters.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Oren, it was very, very interesting talking to you. I hope our viewers enjoyed it as well. I certainly did. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay. See you guys soon in our next episode. Bye-bye.